Hi, I'm Dennis Weiss. Welcome to our town. We're in beautiful Abilene, Kansas in a public library, and looking out the window to the south we can see a raging wind-driven snowstorm going on here. And so the good Lord's delivering us moisture in kind of a frosty way this morning. I have Phil Cosby, who I know well, but I have his card here so I don't mess up his title. He's the State Director of American Family Association of Kansas and Missouri. And Phil, I met you about a decade ago. And how I met you was through something called Operation Daniel.
10 years ago in Abilene, Dickinson County, there was a significant event that occurred. And it had repercussions way beyond Abilene and Dickinson County as far as the reaction. This little town, like a lot of small towns in America, was ambushed by a pornography outlet who pretended they were going to be a retail bookstore, and then the truth was known when the sign was revealed. There was a lot of distress in the community about this wasn't a good fit for the community standard of Dickinson County and Abilene. And there was a response that was Operation Daniel. Now the name of the pornography outlet was the Lion's Den, and Operation Daniel was a play on, of course, Daniel and the Lion's Den. Very significant as people responded, husbands, wives, families, who did some activist stuff in that they reported every truck that pulled in there. If it was a Grondike truck, the next day Mr. Grondike knew where their corporate logo was. Now that had its reverberations not just in the county, but the state, nationally, and even internationally, as the Chinese mainland press talked about the home of Ike Eisenhower. It wasn't new that there was a new porn shop on the interstate, because these are very lucrative fishing holes, the interstate being like the internet. Nobody knows me, I'll pull in here, I won't run into my neighbor and get what I need. But the international press picked it up that there was a battle going on that had a moral component to it. Now, this was, of course, at a time when mobile technologies, at that time, the Apple iPhone had not landed, but it did land about that same time. 10 years ago, a handheld Apple was edible. So now we see not just brick and mortar issues along the interstate of pornography outlets and strip clubs ambushing small towns, but there's a whole cyber technology that has become very lucrative for the pornography industry. As a third of the internet is fully streaming graphic sexualized images. It's very addictive, and it is changing the moral climate, shredding the moral fabric, as it's destroying marriages. As divorce attorneys are reporting now that almost 70% of divorces can be directly related to the infidelity associated with pornography. So marriages, children's innocence, the criminal behavior. Now, not everybody that looks at pornography becomes a criminal. But nevertheless, whether you're here in the county or the state level or the federal level, you'll see about 30% of the inmates are in there for sexual crime. This is not abating. This is not receding. This is an increasingly difficult problem that we're dealing with children, families, and what cyberspace is doing to our families. So what began 10 years ago here sent shockwaves in a lot of places, and a real awareness and a renewing of a conversation about just what is it? It can be as simply stated as, be careful, little eyes, what you see. What is it that's changing our family structures? And asking those causation questions, not just the effects of the criminal behavior that we're seeing, but let's follow those breadcrumbs back to our own personal lives, perhaps indifference, being desensitized. People don't blush easily anymore.
That's right.
Or in despair that it's such a great problem that really there's nothing that can be done.
You know, Phil, we're a country of freedom. We live in Dickinson County that is the home of Dwight David Eisenhower, and I like to say about him, he is the man who gave the world a second chance at freedom. With the successful prosecution of World War II, of which Ike was a very important part, the world had another chance at freedom. If that had went another way, we probably wouldn't be experiencing the freedoms we are today worldwide. However, freedom is never a word that was intended to be understood alone. Said alone, freedom, 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 sounds good. But freedom can never be set apart from the responsibility of the consequences that follow your freedom or my freedom. Right. I think we live in an increasingly libertarian world. I think people maybe are tired of regulation, being told what to do, mostly because of taxation and issues like that. But there's also a strong libertarian component that says, as long as I'm living my life and I'm not hurting you, I should be allowed to do that. I don't have an intellectual opposition to that idea, but I have a practical one. The practical one is this: if you and I are sitting in the same room, there are very few things that you can do with your freedom that don't affect mine. Mm-hmm. In a community, there are very few things that can be done at the corner of Fair Road and I-70 without affecting us. So my question to you is, we've talked about community standards now for 10 years. I don't think people get that. I don't think people get the legal argument. But in my walk as a part-time or a reserve officer for the sheriff's office, and the guy who is an employee owner of a cable TV company, I can tell you that my eyes have seen community standards that are worrisome and shocking, what is in people's homes and the effect it has on us as a community, from their children to their lives, to their interaction with law enforcement, to their interaction with schools, to their interaction with other citizens, to the interactions within their family. There are clearly problems that are being driven by other people's freedoms. I presume it's your position that the freedom of what they say, the Lion's Den on the corner, that the freedoms they stand on is a clear detrimental effect on our community, and that's what your petition based on community standards is about.
Well, not to get into the legal stuff,
okay,
weeds too deep, but let me just touch on the law a little bit. The courts for 50 years now have recognized that sexually oriented businesses, strip clubs, porn shops, do have a negative effect on the community. Mm-hmm. They will increase crime, increase sexually transmitted disease, general blight, drug use, human trafficking. The courts have acknowledged that over and over, and that leopard doesn't change its spots.
They've acknowledged that because the evidence has been proven. That's what courts do, right?
The evidence is profound. Now, one snapshot I think we all recognize is New York City and Times Square. Mm-hmm. Once completely dominated by sex businesses, but then Mayor Giuliani and those in leadership decided that the criminal behavior that was occurring needed to change, and they basically moved those places out and dispersed them around and protected that area, and then crime decreased dramatically, tourism increased, and it's a very attractive place now. Mm-hmm. That's one example to the good of what good leadership and good government can do to protect a community, increase the health of a community. On the opposite hand, Atlanta, Georgia, when they were hosting the Olympics, they made a decision and bought into the idea that they needed to be more cosmopolitan and international and appeal to a more liberal international flavor. And so they actually invited strip clubs to come in and build businesses as they were hosting the Olympics. Well, the Olympics came and went, but later the mayor Shirley Franklin in tears wept how Atlanta had become the sex trafficking capital of the United States. That these were, once the roaches were in, it was tough to get them out. And so it was a bad leadership decision on their part. Tale of two cities. And the courts recognized that. So that was one legal argument we attempted here in Dickinson County. Unfortunately, we didn't get justice in that one. But hey, life is not always fair. You know, you win some, you lose some. But on the second legal point, obscenity. Obscenity is not protected free speech.
And that's fact.
That's fact. It is like
not an opinion, that's fact.
That's fact. It is like libel, slander, perjury. It does not enjoy the protections of genuine free political speech. However, the Supreme Court knew that what was obscene in a Mennonite community would not be the same as in downtown San Francisco. Mm-hmm. So every community has the legal right to pull the evidence into the crucible of the courtroom. And if that judge or jury says, that's obscene, for us, that is not our community standard, that does not fit us, then the protections of free speech, erotic speech, is lifted and is subject to the fines and penalties of that state. That is the law of the United States. It is the law of Kansas, Missouri, and almost all states, that obscenity is unlawful. So those are the two legal elements that Abilene-Dickinson County wrestled with. The social effects that we all feel, we all sense, are pretty self-evident. I mean, when I was a kid, I could play on Saturdays with my pals in the neighborhood. We would go all over town and enjoy those freedoms. Today, you don't see those groups of kids out playing so freely. There's good reason for mom to be worried. We just saw a young girl in Missouri that was abducted from the front yard of a neighbor's house, broad daylight, found dead in the perpetrator's home about 5 miles away. These are not fearful ideas of what could happen. This is really happening. As the Center for Missing and Exploited Children talks about child pornography. There are 300,000 new images of child pornography posted on the internet every month. Now, what law enforcement agency could possibly keep up with that? Mm-hmm. And child pornography is illegal. Mm-hmm. So we're in a bit of a mess, and indifference or hoping in a Chamber of Commerce way that it doesn't exist or it might go away doesn't work. Mm-hmm. It does take some leadership. It does take some resolve and standing where you need to stand, where the battle rages. Mm-hmm. And this is where the battle rages today.
It does for us. This is where we are, right? Mm-hmm. We're in Abilene-Dickinson County, and this is our battle. This is called our town. Mm-hmm. The reason I invited you here is I think your message is compelling, but your message is about our town. Mm-hmm. It's not an esoteric argument, it's an argument of fact. Mm-hmm. Cause and effect, evidence, opportunity to be weighed with a grand jury. That process is working out. I don't want to get into the legal weeds on that, but that's the way this process does get to the court system. Mm-hmm. And hopefully it will, again, get to the court system, and that's where community standards become law. Mm-hmm. Having said that, you said New York and Atlanta. My son-in-law works for a large church in Wichita. Just came home from New Hampshire. Very glad to have him, my daughter, and our granddaughter here. Got a job at a church as an outreach coordinator. Several different programs. One of which is he works with a lady who runs the sex trafficking outreach. Mm-hmm. That's not New York. That's not Atlanta. That's Wichita. And the corridor, I-35 and I-70. Mm-hmm. We're setting on I-70 because I put it here. Mm-hmm. I-70. This is our problem. Mm-hmm. We just don't see it face to face. It's here, and it happens every day.
Human trafficking. Sex trafficking, according to the FBI, is now the #2 moneymaker for international crime. It's a renewable resource for a pimp, that there's a great deal of indifference of children lost and never found and get caught up in trafficking and the pornography business. And you're right, the interstates, truck stops are a transfer point for a lot of these. The average age is 13 years old for human trafficking. A lot of these children are transferred from truck to truck right there at on the interstate. So the interstate, again, like the internet, as far as we're not just downtown anymore. The internet has changed. It is a global problem. And I was invited to the University of Dublin, Ireland, because they were curious about what happened in Abilene. And they wanted to talk about it was a debate against some European pornographers, and they reached into what they thought was the reddest of red states and found an example of some actions that was being taken. And I had the privilege to go there in front of all those university students and tell our story, and tell the name of the debate was pornography and its global impact, and to talk about the global impact of what was happening. That was a lot of fun, and to everyone's surprise, we won the debate. It was not the expected outcome, as those young people in that age group and their raging hormones and sort of a European flavor got very sober about the issues of what were happening, and it was fun to watch their faces as they went from giddy, talking about sex, to a sober reality of what they were facing.
The sober reality of this show this day, we have about 3 minutes left, I think. I heard on the way to town, I heard one of at least 1,000 commercials or programs or comments on the radio, I've been driving a lot lately, about seatbelt use. And how it was being taught in the schools, law enforcement's in the schools reminding people, you buckle your seatbelt, you survive the wreck. It's a primary infraction now, a seatbelt, and that's all good. I applaud that, that's good. Save kids alive, teach them how to put a seatbelt on. But my goodness, prevention, healthcare, prevention, social, disaster, there is a causation here. We're just afraid to look at it. It affects too many people in too many corners, and fear overcomes logic often. Even though it's logical to see the connection, and we don't want our communities to go downhill, fear overcomes us and we do nothing. I don't like that much.
Well, the pornographers have money, and they have attorneys, and they do bully their way as to intimidate small towns, even large systems of government. And however, I believe that most Kansans have a very moral center, even the United States. Occasionally we will see something like Mr. Cathy with Chick-fil-A. And the surge of people that went to support that business. We will see Duck Dynasty make a statement, and a surge of people will come to say traditional marriage and sexual immorality is where we are. And so these contests are going on, and I believe the good people still outweigh those that would bully themselves and appear to be the majority. But there's a tipping point that's coming. That's happening, and we're immersed in it. And now's the time to speak up, protect your kids. And that's a whole nother story about how do you protect them from technology.
I'd love to have you come back and bring Cathy with you, your wife. I told you before the cameras come on, I've seen her speak to this issue, and I see it so clearly on her face. She was an investigator here in our town. She doesn't speak about New York or Atlanta. She speaks about her years of investigating crime here, and I can always see it on her face, the impact on families here. So I'd love to have you back and please call me and tell me when you're around so we can schedule something to do that. But this is called Our Town, and as I finish off the program here, what a wonderful opportunity. If this program touched you, any issue on it, on either side, it's our town. That means it's your town. So act. Very visible guy. This issue is being worked in Dickinson County today. There are a lot of people. I saw 17 pastors, so that means almost every church in the area is involved in this one way or another. There's a lot of opportunity to talk to somebody you know about this issue. Don't let it slide. It's important to our town, and we thank Phil Cosby for coming. Good to see you, my friend. Good Godspeed on your work. Folks, thanks for watching. For Eagle Communications in our town, I'm Dennis Weiss.